parents forgot my birthday and said, "Grow up, it's really not important." So I just smiled. 2 days later they were begging to be invited when they found out. You know, it's strange how the small things in life, the things you think are a given, can unravel everything you thought you knew. My birthday used to mean something. Growing up, it wasn't about the presents or the cake. It was about being surrounded by family. About feeling, even if just for one day, like I mattered. This year was different. I woke up that morning expecting the usual, a clumsy, happy birthday, text from my mom, maybe a phone call from my dad if he remembered between meetings. Instead, there was nothing. At first, I thought, maybe they're planning something. Maybe they're busy but they'll call tonight. But the day dragged on, hour after hour, and the silence became deafening. Not a text. Not a call. Not even a lazy Facebook post. It wasn't until later that night, scrolling through my phone out of habit, that I found the first clue, an Instagram post from my parents. Smiling, wine glasses raised, captions bubbling about. A well-deserved night out. A celebration, but not for me. That's when the first knot twisted in my stomach. I sat there, phone in hand, heart sinking slowly, wondering if maybe I was wrong. Maybe they forgot, by accident. But deep down, I already knew the truth. For them, my birthday wasn't even worth remembering. I told myself I was being dramatic. That it didn't matter. That birthdays were just another day once you were an adult, right? But as the evening wore on, the excuses got harder to swallow. I wasn't some distant cousin. I was their son. The same son who used to get up at 5 a.m. before school to shovel the driveway so Dad wouldn't slip on his way to work. The same kid who worked 2 part-time jobs through college so they wouldn't have to take out another loan. And now, here I was. Forgotten. Not even worth a 5-second text. I don't know what came over me, but around 9:30 p.m., I picked up my phone and sent a message to our family group chat. Nothing fancy. No accusations. Just a simple, "Hey, did you guys forget what today is?" Read receipts popped up almost instantly. First Mom, then Dad. No typing bubbles. No apologies. Just silence. After a few minutes, my mom finally replied, "Oh honey, grow up. It's really not that important." A few seconds later, my dad chimed in. "Yeah, man. You're not a kid anymore. Birthdays are for children." I just stared at the screen, reading those words over and over. It felt like someone had dumped a bucket of ice water over me. Not because they forgot. Not because they didn't apologize. But because they didn't care. And maybe they never really had. I sat there for a long time, letting that sink in. Not angry. Not even sad exactly. Just hollow. Like a bridge I had been standing on my whole life had suddenly given way beneath me, and there was no point in trying to climb back up. Something inside me shifted then, something deep and permanent. I realized that their love had never been unconditional. It had always been about what I could do for them, how I made them look, what needs of theirs I could fill. Now, they didn't even bother to pretend anymore. And so I did something that surprised even me. I smiled. Not the kind of smile you wear when you're happy, but the kind you wear when you finally see the truth for what it is. And in that moment, I made a decision. I wasn't going to argue. I wasn't going to beg them to care. I was going to celebrate my birthday. But not with them. Not with people who thought love was conditional on being useful. No. I was going to celebrate with the people who had proven they cared without expecting anything in return. And this time, I was going to do it right. That night, as the house sat dark and heavy around me, I opened my laptop and started making a list. Not of grievances, not of memories I'd wished had gone differently. A list of people who had loved me without conditions. It wasn't a long list. But it was a good one. I thought of Mason, my best friend since high school, who once drove 3 hours at 2 a.m. just because I was having a terrible night. I thought of Mrs. Reynolds, my old neighbor, who never forgot to bake me a pie on my birthday even after we moved away. I thought of my coworker, Jenna, who always left a coffee on my desk when she knew I was having a rough week, no questions asked. I thought of Coach Daniels, who never treated me like an afterthought, even when my own father skipped my games. Name after name, a small circle of real love began to take shape on the screen. And the idea grew. It started as a flicker, just dinner, maybe drinks. Something small. But the longer I sat there, the more I realized something. I had spent my whole life making myself small to fit inside other people's definitions of what I should be. This time, I wasn't going to do that. This time, I was going to take up space. I booked a rooftop venue in the city, one of those places you always tell yourself is too fancy, too much. I ordered food that I actually liked, not the budget-friendly stuff my parents always picked over my protests. I hired a DJ. I made invitations with my own two hands, simple but heartfelt. And I sent them out to everyone on my list. No fanfare. No begging anyone to come. Just, I'm having a birthday party. You're invited if you want to celebrate with me. The RSVPs came back fast. Every single one of them said yes. Every single one. It felt foreign. Not because I didn't think they cared, but because I'd gotten so used to expecting nothing. For once, I wasn't planning an event to impress anyone, to prove anything. I was just celebrating. My life. My survival. Me. I didn't tell my parents. Not because I wanted to hide it, no, I wasn't hiding anymore. But because they had already made it clear, my birthday didn't matter. I wasn't going to extend an invitation to people who thought love was optional. The night of the party arrived like a breath of fresh air. I remember standing in front of the mirror, straightening my tie, taking a deep breath, and realizing something simple but profound. I wasn't nervous. For the first time in a long, long time, I wasn't performing. I wasn't trying to live up to someone else's idea of what I should be. I was just showing up, as me. When I stepped onto the rooftop, the city stretched out around me, glittering, alive. The air was cool but not cold, the kind of crispness that makes you feel awake, like the world is brand new. The venue manager, a woman named Lila, had set everything up exactly the way I asked. Long tables with fairy lights draped above them. Soft music playing at first, something acoustic and warm. Candles flickering at every table. And the view, God, the view. The whole skyline twinkled like it was there just for us. The first guests started trickling in right as the sun was dipping below the buildings. Messin showed up first, grinning and pulling me into a bear hug so hard it nearly knocked me over. "Man, you did it," he said, slapping me on the back. "Finally celebrating yourself." Jenna arrived a few minutes later, handing me a little gift bag with a shy smile. "I don't know if it's your thing," she said, "but I saw it and thought of you." Inside was a simple leather notebook, the kind meant for writing stories, or maybe new beginnings. I blinked hard against the sudden sting in my eyes and just said, "Thank you." More and more people came. Old friends from college I hadn't seen in years. A few coworkers who had become like a second family without me realizing it. Even Mrs. Reynolds, now in her 70s, showed up wearing a bright yellow scarf and carrying a homemade pie. The night filled with laughter and clinking glasses. Stories were traded, memories shared. Someone even started an impromptu karaoke session halfway through, Mason butchering a country song so badly that people were wiping tears from their eyes from laughing so hard. And in the middle of it all, I stood there, just stood there, and realized. This is family. Not the people you're born to. The people who choose you. The people who show up when they don't have to. It was overwhelming in the best possible way. And then, somewhere around 10 p.m., my phone buzzed in my pocket. I ignored it. I didn't even have to look to know who it was. But when it buzzed again, and again, curiosity got the better of me. I slipped away for a moment, leaning against the balcony railing as I checked the screen. Missed calls. Texts. From my parents. "Where are you? Why didn't you tell us you were having a party? We want to come celebrate too." And then the kicker. "Please, we're outside. Let us in." I turned my head slowly, glancing toward the elevator that led up to the rooftop. Sure enough, through the glass, I could see them, my parents, standing awkwardly in the lobby downstairs, looking around like lost tourists at a place they didn't belong. And maybe for the first time, they really didn't. I slipped my phone back into my pocket, took a deep breath, and turned my back to the elevator. Inside, my real family was waiting for me. Tonight wasn't for apologies. It wasn't for guilt or explanations or second chances. Tonight was mine. And I wasn't about to give it away to people who only remembered my worth when they realized the world could see it too. The calls didn't stop. One after another, vibrating angrily in my pocket like the world was trying to tug me back into something I had already decided to leave behind. At first, I ignored them. Easy enough. I went back to the party, laughed at a ridiculous story Mason was telling, accepted a second slice of pie from Mrs. Reynolds, clinked glasses with Jenna as she toasted to new beginnings. But every so often, I'd catch myself glancing at the elevator. Because deep down, I knew my parents. They weren't the type to take silence as an answer. Sure enough, about 20 minutes later, there was a commotion near the front desk. I could see it from across the rooftop through the glass doors. My parents arguing with the building's security guard. My mom waving her arms in that dramatic way she always did when she felt cornered. My dad, arms crossed, his face flushed with the same frustrated anger I remembered from my childhood, the look he used when he couldn't control the outcome. I sighed and excused myself from the group. I didn't want a scene. Not tonight. I slipped through the doors and took the elevator down. As soon as the doors opened, my mother rushed toward me. "There you are!" she cried, reaching for my arm like she thought she could still pull me along behind her like a misbehaving child. I stepped back before she could touch me. My father, more restrained but no less furious, stood behind her. "You didn't tell us you were throwing a party," he said, his voice clipped. "Why weren't we invited?" I met their eyes, calm and steady. "Because," I said, "you taught me birthdays aren't important." They both froze. My mother's mouth opened and closed a few times like she was searching for the right excuse, the right manipulation. But I didn't give her the chance. "You told me to grow up," I continued. "You told me it didn't matter." I could see it hit them then, not just the words, but the weight of everything they'd built, every careless dismissal, every missed opportunity to be better. And now, the realization that they had been left out of something they thought they were entitled to. "But we're your parents," my mother whispered, voice trembling now, whether from anger or fear, I didn't know. "We love you." I smiled. Not out of cruelty. But because, for once, I didn't feel trapped by that word anymore. "You taught me that love is conditional," I said. "You made it clear that my feelings didn't matter. That your convenience mattered more." I let the silence stretch between us. They shifted, uncomfortable, unprepared for a version of me that wasn't begging for scraps of affection. "And you know what?" I said, voice steady. "You were right." My mom blinked. My dad's jaw clenched. "I have grown up. And as an adult, I've decided that my life will no longer include people who make me feel worthless." I took one step back, toward the elevator, and they instinctively moved forward, as if proximity alone could change my mind. But it was too late. Way too late. "I'm not angry," I said, and I meant it. "I'm just done." The doors slid open behind me with a soft ding. And without another word, no yelling, no final blowout, I stepped inside. I watched as the doors closed on their stunned, desperate faces. And when the elevator started to rise, I didn't feel regret. Or sadness. Or rage. I felt free. When the elevator doors opened again, the noise from the rooftop hit me like a wave, music, laughter, the clinking of glasses. Life. Real life. For a second, I just stood there, letting it wash over me. Letting the weight of the last conversation slip off my shoulders like a coat that didn't fit anymore. I wasn't carrying it with me. Not this time. As I stepped back into the party, Mason spotted me and waved me over with a giant grin, a beer in one hand and a plate of half-eaten cake in the other. "Where'd you disappear to, birthday boy?" he called. "Had to let go of some dead weight," I said with a shrug. He laughed without asking questions, the kind of friend who knew better than to pry when the answer was written all over your face. Within minutes, someone pulled me into a group photo, then another. Jenna dragged me out to dance to some terrible pop song we both secretly loved. Mrs. Reynolds insisted on a second slice of pie. For good luck. And just like that, the moment with my parents felt like a tiny, distant thing. A smudge on an otherwise perfect night. Because the laughter, the easy warmth, the faces lit up under the fairy lights, this was real. Not bought. Not owed. Not conditional. Just love. Exactly as it should be. And for the first time in my life, I finally understood. Family isn't who shares your blood. It's who shows up when it matters most. Later that night, after the last hugs were given and the final plates were cleared, I stood alone on the rooftop. The city spread out before me, endless and glittering, like a living map of all the places I could go, all the futures I could still claim. The music had faded. The laughter had drifted off into the night air. It was just me now. And I wasn't lonely. I leaned against the railing, hands tucked into my pockets, and for the first time in a long, long time, I felt light. Not because everything was perfect. Not because cutting ties didn't hurt. But because the weight that had been dragging behind me for years, the guilt, the desperation to be enough for people who never really saw me, was finally gone. I wasn't carrying it anymore. I thought back to the way my parents had looked when I told them no. Stunned. Confused. As if my love was something they were entitled to, something that had no limits, no requirements. But they were wrong. Love should never have to be earned through suffering. Love should never be a transaction. And if walking away was the price of peace, then I had finally decided I was willing to pay it. As I stood there watching the city breathe beneath me, a thought crossed my mind, something so simple, but so hard one. You don't owe people a lifetime of forgiveness just because you share a name. It took me almost 3 decades to realize that. To really, truly believe it. I used to think loyalty meant tolerating pain. That family meant enduring hurt, swallowing it, pretending it didn't matter. But loyalty, I learned, isn't about enduring abuse. It's about standing with people who would stand for you just as fiercely. It's about knowing the difference between love and obligation, and choosing yourself when no one else will. For so long, I thought I had to earn love. Work harder. Be more patient. Be more forgiving. I thought maybe, if I gave enough of myself, they'd see me differently. But love, real love, doesn't ask you to bleed just to be seen. It doesn't punish you for needing, for wanting, for existing. And it certainly doesn't forget you on the one day you needed it most, then tell you to grow up when you hurt. That night, standing on that rooftop, I made a promise to myself. I would never again fight to stay in a place where I wasn't wanted. Not for blood. Not for history. Not even for the memory of what I wish things could have been. I didn't go home right away. I stayed on that rooftop long after everyone else had left, just letting the night wrap itself around me like a blanket. The candles had burned low, the tables were half cleared, but the lights, the fairy lights I had strung myself, were still glowing above me. Soft. Warm. Steady. And maybe it was the exhaustion catching up with me, or maybe it was the weight finally lifting, but I found myself smiling. Not because I was happy they were gone, but because I was finally free to want more. For the first time in my life, it wasn't about survival. It wasn't about proving anything to anyone. It was about choosing peace. I pulled out my phone, scrolling past the dozens of missed calls and voicemails from my parents without opening them. Each message felt smaller now, like a pebble tapping at a window I no longer lived behind. Then, without a second thought, I blocked their numbers. Both of them. I didn't send a last text. I didn't give them a final lecture or one more chance to twist the knife. I just let it go. And it felt good. Not dramatic. Not vindictive. Just necessary. I realized something else standing there alone. Forgiveness isn't always about letting people back into your life. Sometimes it's about letting yourself leave, without bitterness, without anger, and refusing to carry their hurt with you anymore. I forgave them for not being what I needed. I forgave myself for staying too long. But forgiveness didn't mean reopening the door. Some doors need to stay shut. Not out of hate, out of self-respect. Because some people will never understand the harm they cause, and that's their journey, not mine. Mine was just beginning. And as I looked out at the city again, I realized something I wish someone had told me a long time ago. Choosing yourself isn't selfish. It's survival. It's love. It's freedom. And for the first time, I wasn't just surviving. I was living.